You have eaten this food your entire life. You have ordered it at restaurants, cooked it at holidays, passed it down to your children, and never once questioned where it came from. But here is the truth that most history books quietly skipped over. Some of the most beloved, most iconic foods in American culture were not invented by the brands on the label or the chefs on television. They were invented in the kitchens, fields, and fire pits of black men and women in the American South. People whose names were never written down. People whose genius was borrowed without credit, stolen without shame, and celebrated without acknowledgement for generations. Today, that changes. We are going back to the hands that stirred the pots, the minds that created the recipes, and the culture that gave America its most defining flavors. By the time this video ends, you will never look at your plate the same way again. Stay with us until the very end, because number one on this list will genuinely change how you see American food history forever. Drop a comment right now with the food you think belongs on this list. Let us see how many of you already know the truth. 10. Fried chicken. Let us start here because this is where the argument always begins. Fried chicken is one of the most consumed, most commercialized foods on the planet. Kentucky. Fried chicken operates in over 150 countries. Popeyes, Chick-fil-A, Church's Chicken. The industry is worth billions. And the origin story most Americans learned is either incomplete, deliberately vague, or outright wrong. Scottish immigrants who settled in the American South did bring a tradition of frying chicken in fat, but what they were making bore almost no resemblance to what we now call fried chicken. Their version was plain, unspiced, cooked in lard, with no particular technique or seasoning philosophy. What transformed that simple act into something transcendent, something that sparked a global fast food empire, was the work of enslaved black cooks in southern plantation kitchens. Enslaved women, most of whom were never named in any historical record, developed the seasoning profiles, the marinating techniques, the spice combinations, the frying temperatures maintained through feel and instinct rather than thermometers, and the double dredging methods that created the crackling, deeply flavored crust that defines the dish today. They brought knowledge rooted in West African cooking traditions, where frying in palm oil was common and spicing was sophisticated, and they merged that knowledge with the ingredients available in the American South. After emancipation, black women began selling fried chicken from their own homes and along railroad lines. These women, known as waiter carriers, would prepare chicken, walk to train stations, and sell meals to passengers during brief stops. This was economic survival and entrepreneurship happening simultaneously, decades before any fried chicken franchise existed. The layered spice, the depth, the way the crust shatters and the inside stays impossibly juicy. That is not geography. That is generations of culinary knowledge developed by black cooks whose contribution to one of America's most profitable food categories has been systematically undervalued. 9. Barbecue. When Americans say barbecue, they mean something specific. Not grilling, not cooking meat over fire in the simple sense. They mean the low and slow tradition, the smoke, the rubs, the regional sauce variations, the way collagen breaks down over hours into something impossibly tender. They mean an entire culture built around a cooking method, and that culture in its American form is inseparable from the history of black pitmasters in the South. The American barbecue tradition as a defined, regionally diverse practice was shaped overwhelmingly by enslaved black men assigned the role of pitmaster on plantations and at community gatherings throughout the antebellum South. Whole hog barbecue, the technique whilst forming the backbone of the Carolinas tradition and influencing every regional style that followed, required knowledge that could not be read from a page. It required understanding how different woods burned and what flavors they imparted. It required knowing by sight and smell and touch how the meat was progressing at 2 in the morning, how to manage airflow in a pit with no instruments, how to balance heat across an entire animal for 18, 20 hours without losing the cook. This knowledge was held by enslaved black men brought out specifically when large-scale barbecue events were being prepared. The success of those events depended entirely on the skill of the enslaved pitmaster. The pitmaster got none of the credit publicly. The host received all of it. After emancipation, black pitmasters opened their own establishments and defined the regional traditions that food writers would later celebrate as distinctly American. The mustard-based sauces of South Carolina, the vinegar tradition of Eastern North Carolina, the dry rub heritage of Memphis. Every one of these traditions has black hands at its foundation. 8. Gumbo. To understand gumbo, you have to understand that it is not simply a recipe. It is a document. Every ingredient in a pot of properly made gumbo tells a story about where it came from and what they survived to get here. The dish draws from West African cooking, from French culinary tradition in Louisiana, from indigenous Choctaw people who contributed file powder made from sassafras leaves, and from the Spanish colonial period. But the architects of gumbo, the people who understood how to make all of these influences work together as a single cohesive dish, were enslaved black women in Louisiana. The word gumbo itself is derived from king gombo, the Bantu word for okra. Okra was brought to the Americas by enslaved Africans who carried seeds with them across the Atlantic. In West African cooking, okra served not just as a vegetable, but as a thickening agent in stews, a function it still serves in gumbo today. The enslaved women who cooked in Louisiana plantation kitchens recognized that okra could perform the same function and built a new dish around that knowledge. The roux at the heart of gumbo, that deeply cooked mixture of flour and fat that can take 60 minutes of constant stirring to develop properly, reflects a level of patience and technique that is not accidental. You cannot rush a roux. You cannot fake it. You can only learn it from someone who already knows it. And that knowledge traveled from kitchen to kitchen through an oral tradition that sustained itself across generations of black culinary culture in Louisiana. Today, gumbo is Louisiana's official state cuisine, and the debt owed to the black women who created it is rarely front and center in that celebration. 7. Mac and cheese. You know this dish. You have eaten it at holidays, at potlucks, out of blue boxes on Tuesday nights, at fancy restaurants where it costs $18. Mac and cheese is everywhere, and its association with soul food traditions, holiday tables, and black Southern cooking is not an accident. The popular narrative gives credit to Thomas Jefferson, who supposedly encountered the dish in France and popularized it in America. Jefferson did serve a baked pasta dish at a White House dinner in 1802. But here is what that story consistently omits. Jefferson did not cook it. His enslaved cook did. His name was James Hemings. James Hemings was an enslaved man who Jefferson brought to France specifically to be trained in French culinary techniques. Hemings spent years in Paris learning to cook at a professional level, returned to Monticello, and cooked there before negotiating his freedom. The macaroni and cheese, the French-influenced dishes, the culinary sophistication that made Jefferson's table famous among his contemporaries. All of it passed through the hands of James Hemings. Beyond that moment, the transformation of mac and cheese into a distinctly black Southern comfort food happened in black kitchens across the South. The baked version with its brown top and layers of sharp cheddar, built around whole milk and butter and black pepper and sometimes a custard base made with eggs, is a black Southern invention refined over generations. It is not the same dish that came from France. It was made better. The difference between macaroni and cheese as a European pasta dish and macaroni and cheese as an American cultural institution is Black Southern cooking. 6. Hot sauce. Consider what is on the table at any American restaurant, diner, or soul food kitchen from Atlanta to Los Angeles. There is almost certainly a bottle of hot sauce within reach. The hot sauce industry in the United States alone is worth billions of dollars and has been one of the fastest growing condiment categories for 15 years. That did not happen by accident. The tradition of fermenting hot peppers with salt and vinegar into a pourable, shelf-stable sauce that enhances virtually any food is rooted directly in the cooking traditions of the American South, specifically in Black Southern kitchens where resourcefulness and flavor were equally important values. Pepper vinegar, the earliest ancestor of American hot sauce, was a staple in Black Southern cooking long before the first commercial hot sauce was bottled. Enslaved cooks used it to add heat and acid to greens, beans, meats, and starches. The combination of fermentation, salt, acid, and capsaicin was understood intuitively as a way to both preserve flavor and make food more complex under conditions where access to varied ingredients was severely limited. When Edmund McIlhenny developed Tabasco sauce in Louisiana in the 1860s, he was working in an environment where this pepper fermenting tradition was already established and understood. The knowledge was in the culture, being practiced daily in Black kitchens across the region. The commercialization and branding came later, and the commercial credit went to others, but the culinary tradition that made hot sauce possible in the American South belongs to Black cooks. 5. Chitlins. Chitlins, the southern pronunciation of chitterlings, meaning the small intestines of a pig, occupy a complicated space in American food culture. They are celebrated in Black culinary tradition as a dish of resilience and ingenuity, and they are one of the most visible examples of how enslaved people transformed what they were given into something that became a cultural cornerstone. On plantations, enslaved people were given the parts of the animal the enslaving family did not want: the ears, the feet, the tail, the skin, the organs, the intestines. These were allocated to the enslaved quarters as a matter of hierarchy. From those allocations, Black cooks created an entire culinary vocabulary. Chitlins required extraordinary labor to prepare safely: hours of cleaning, multiple rinses, careful inspection, and precise cooking at temperatures that ensured food safety long before food safety was a regulated concept. The technique was developed entirely within Black culinary tradition because the white plantation household was not cooking or eating intestines. What makes chitlins historically significant is not just what they are, but what they represent. They represent the ability to take something discarded and make it worthy, the culinary philosophy that would come to define soul food as a tradition, transforming scarcity into abundance and limitation into creativity. Chitlin circuits, the informal network of venues where Black entertainers could perform safely during the era of segregation, were named after this dish because it represented the resourcefulness that sustained Black life in America during some of its darkest chapters. 4. Cornbread. Cornbread is so embedded in Southern food culture that it almost disappears into the background. It is always there, on the side, in the cast iron skillet, crumbled into buttermilk, baked into dressing at Thanksgiving. So familiar that its origins rarely come up in conversation, and those origins are almost entirely indigenous and Black. Corn itself was cultivated by indigenous peoples of the Americas for thousands of years before European contact. Those processing and cooking techniques were indigenous knowledge systems that Europeans adopted and largely failed to credit. Enslaved Black people in the South merged that corn knowledge with their own West African cooking traditions around grain and meal-based foods to develop the cornbread tradition that the American South claims as its own. The cast iron skillet, the texture that comes from coarse stone ground meal versus fine industrial cornmeal, the addition of buttermilk, the decision to use lard versus oil, the question of whether sugar belongs in cornbread at all. These are debates that carry real cultural weight because they are arguments about authenticity, about whose version of the dish is the real one. The answer points back to Black Southern cooks, who spent generations refining the recipe under conditions where cornmeal was often one of the few reliable ingredients available. The cornbread celebrated in Southern food culture is the product of that refinement. 3. Hoppin' John. Eaten on New Year's Day across the South for generations, Hoppin' John is black-eyed peas cooked with rice and smoked pork, served with the belief that eating it on January 1st will bring good luck and prosperity. It is a dish so tied to Southern tradition that entire communities organize their New Year's celebrations around it. And it is a dish that came directly from West Africa. Black-eyed peas, also called cowpeas, are native to Africa. They were brought to the Americas by enslaved Africans who understood how to cook them, season them, and combine them with rice to create a complete protein. Rice and beans cooked together is a West African culinary foundation that appears across the African diaspora. From red beans and rice in Louisiana, to rice and peas in Jamaica, to feijoada in Brazil. Each of these dishes traces its roots back to West African cooking traditions carried across the Atlantic by enslaved people. In the American South, the combination of black-eyed peas and rice became Hoppin' John, developed by black cooks into the specific Southern version the region claims today. The smoked pork element added the savory depth that makes the dish so satisfying. The dish was associated with New Year's good luck, possibly because black-eyed peas swell when cooked, symbolizing growing wealth, or because they were one of the only foods reliably available during lean winter months, making their abundance on January 1st feel genuinely meaningful. 2. Sweet potato pie. This is where the great American dessert debate begins. Sweet potato pie is not pumpkin pie. It is older than pumpkin pie, technically more sophisticated than pumpkin pie, and its place in Black Southern culinary tradition is so deep that challenging it feels personal to millions of people. Sweet potatoes are native to the Americas, but their use in cooking was dramatically shaped by enslaved black people in the South who recognized in them something that reminded them of the yam, a staple food in West African cuisine. The two vegetables are not botanically related, but they share a sweetness and starchy texture that made the sweet potato a familiar foundation for someone working from West African culinary instincts. The sweet potato pie that comes from Black Southern tradition is a custard pie built on roasted sweet potato flesh combined with butter, eggs, milk, sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and warming spices. The technique for making it, including the specific texture that distinguishes a properly made sweet potato pie from something closer to a casserole, was developed in black kitchens across the South over generations. Every November, grocery stores fill with mass-produced pumpkin pies that have become almost synonymous with American Thanksgiving. But in black homes across the South, it was never pumpkin pie on the holiday table. It was sweet potato pie, made from scratch, often from sweet potatoes grown in the backyard, by women who learned the recipe from their mothers who learned it from theirs. When Patti LaBelle released her sweet potato pie through Walmart in 2015 and sold 1 million pies in a week after a viral review, it was not just a commercial success story. It was a moment when a dish that Black Southern women had been making for generations finally got a fraction of the mainstream recognition it had always deserved. 1. Soul food itself. And here is where we stop and reckon with something bigger than any single dish. The foods we have been discussing are not isolated inventions. They are a connected culinary tradition, coming from the same place, the same people, the same particular genius that emerged from centuries of cooking under conditions that could have produced nothing at all, but instead produced one of the most distinctive, most beloved, and most widely imitated culinary traditions on the planet. soul food is not a category of recipes. It is a document of survival. It is evidence that a group of people stripped of nearly everything: their names, their languages, their families, their freedom, held onto their knowledge, passed it forward through the one domain where they had some autonomy, and built something from almost nothing that the rest of America has been eating, celebrating, and borrowing from ever since. The ingredients of soul food are inseparable from the conditions that produced it. Collard greens cooked long and slow with smoked ham hocks became soul food because those were the greens available, and the smoked pork pieces were what the enslaved community had access to. Crackling cornbread, fried catfish, black-eyed peas, candied yams, neck bones, oxtails, all of these became soul food for the same reason. They represent the transformation of limitation into something worth sitting down for, worth cooking all day for, and worth passing down. The Great Migration of the early 20th century, when millions of black Southerners moved north to Chicago, Detroit, New York, and Philadelphia, brought soul food with them. Soul food restaurants opened in Harlem and on the south side of Chicago. The dishes that enslaved people had created in plantation kitchens became the comfort food of a displaced community, rebuilding itself in unfamiliar cities. Those flavors kept people connected to where they came from even when they were 1,000 miles away. Then the food spread. Non-black Americans encountered soul food in cities, fell in love with it, and the dishes began showing up in mainstream restaurants without attribution. The spice rubs became barbecue chains. The fried chicken techniques became fast food empires. The collard greens became trendy side dishes at farm-to-table restaurants. The mac and cheese became a menu staple coast to coast. All of this happened while the cultural credit frequently remained detached from the cultural source. The conversation around food credit is not about gatekeeping. It is not about saying that people outside of black culture cannot enjoy these dishes. It is about accuracy, honesty, and knowing the full story of what is on your plate, not just the part that begins with a brand name or a franchise or a cookbook published in the last 50 years. The 10 foods on this list are 10 entry points into a history far larger than any single video can contain. Behind every one of them is a person who was never paid, never credited, never given a cookbook deal, never invited to appear on a cooking show, and yet whose hands shaped what America tastes like, whose knowledge survived centuries, crossed oceans in the memory of displaced people, fed communities through their hardest moments, and eventually became so woven into American culture that most people never stopped to ask where it came from. Now you know where it came from. Go to your kitchen. Look at what you are cooking tonight. Think about the hands that invented it. Think about the tradition that refined it. Think about the people who never got to put their name on it, but put everything they had into making it worth eating. If this video changed how you see your plate, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We have more food history coming that will change how you see your table, your pantry, and the culinary world you thought you already knew. Drop a comment with the food that surprised you most. And if there is a dish you think we missed, tell us. Because this history is deep, it is wide, and it is only just beginning to be told the way it deserves. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay honest, and keep rising.